Morning. This morning I'm in my garden and we are going to pick the onions. So it is October. We could probably leave them a little bit longer, but I'm getting a little anxious because my supply of onions is going down, and onions take a little bit of time to dry out. You don't want to just pick an onion and cut it open and use it. It's be super potent and really wet. So our onions have pretty much, we've stopped watering them. They might get a little bit water once a week or so, but they're ready. Let me show them to you. So here is part of the onion patch. The other part's behind me, but these are actually looking really good. So what you want to look for when you're looking at if your onion is ready, got a little garbage in here. You want it to be popping out of the ground like this. You see how it's on top of the soil, both of these. It should look a little dry on the outside, okay? Like some of the outer pieces, layers are drying up, okay? And then the top of it, you want it to be nice and long, and it can be fairly thick for kind of the stalk of the onion. So that's what you're looking for when you want to see if your onions are ready. Now these are actually pretty good size onions. I do have smaller ones, like for instance, these guys. You can see how much smaller they are. Part of that is because they're right next to each other. They didn't get thinned out as well, and that's fine. These onions will do just fine. You don't have to do anything special. They're just smaller onions, and they might be slightly more potent, kind of depends. And you'll also see that the green onion part, or the stalk part of the onion, is a lot smaller. There's nothing wrong with these onions. They're just smaller, that's all. So I'm gonna go ahead and dig up my onion patch, kind of show you how I do it. In an onion patch, I wouldn't use a shovel. I would probably use a pitchfork, but I do not have mine right now. I went to look for it and my children have confiscated it. So I just use a shovel, and I'm just gonna pull that onion right out of the ground. Just make sure you kind of get under it, and you want to get all the roots. Okay, that's an important part. Eventually you'll chop those off, but start by getting all the roots so you know you got the whole onion. Here's our onion harvest. It looks pretty good. We've got some that look like this, that are the same root. Typically this is just not thinning them out right, but sometimes they do split. But these are still good to eat, and you can just snap them apart and you have two separate onions. And some of them are just misshapen. Nothing wrong with that. Still good onions. So we're going to go ahead and take these up to the house, and I'll show you how I lay them out to dry them. All right, we are getting ready to lay out our onions. As I said earlier, when it comes to onions, they are really wet if you cut into them right after harvest, because they've been holding on to all of that wonderful water that's been used. It's got some weeds on it. So what I do, this is just like a little Fisher-Price table that we've had for 100 years. I'm just putting it in the shade, and I just put a paper bag over the top. You can do the same thing with newspaper. And then I'm just gonna come down here and lay out my onions. Just pull them out of my bucket here. And I'm just gonna lay them out on the paper, just like this. So this is one way to easily dry them. I'll just leave them out here for a week or so. You don't want them in the sun. You want them in the shade. If you have like a picnic table or something, you can move into the shade or something like that. We just happen to have this small little table, and it works because we use our picnic table a lot. Another way you could do this, I've seen people who will braid it. So they'll braid the tops of the onions, braid the whole thing, and then hang it like on the wall in their garage or somewhere that stays cool. I guess the garage isn't necessarily the best place for it, but in their cellar or whatever, so that the onions will dry. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. This is just the easiest way for me because we don't really have a cellar that we can put our onions in. And you want to try and have them be a single layer. Try not to layer them on top of each other, or at least get them in between. And you don't have to take the tops off, but there you go. So we'll just leave this here for a week or so. Then I'll come back, see how they are. We want the greens to have dried up, and then we can trim them down and store them.
Our newest method of preserving our onions for long-term storage is we like to braid them. So you can see that's what I'm doing here. I leave the greens of the onions on, and I leave them nice and long. And these can be dried onions already, or they could be fresh onions that you braid and then you just hang them to dry this way. So either method will work. You just want to make sure that the greens are long enough. And I'm kind of French braiding it in. So I'll braid one side in and then add an onion to that and then braid the other side. And this is a great method just because you can really get a lot of onions braided in, and then you can hang these on a wall somewhere cool. So if you have some cold storage somewhere, we hung them this year in our mudroom. It's just off of our garage, and it stays actually pretty cool. When you're ready at the top, you'll just put some twine, and you'll use that to hang it up on a hook or a nail.